Well, good day everyone. My name's Dave and you've joined us for the Reach Australia podcast where we are talking all things building. So if you've ever sat in a building, wondered what you could do, this is the episode for you. In our previous episode, we did a really deep dive into what are some of the general principles and what do you do before. So if you haven't checked that out, go and have a listen to that. We're joined by our special guest, Andrew Robson. Thanks for joining us.
Great to be here again.
Now, we want to start to think about that building process. We've done everything beforehand. We're up to the actual building process. What happens there? Just give us a really brief sort of overview of what goes on.
So we talked before about, you've got the building approved, the development location approved, you've done your construction certificate process, which has generated a very detailed design for the building, and that is certifiable, as in you're allowed to build that building, it's legal, it meets all the building code. Those documents then form the basis of a tender, which means you need to go, and I think even if you've got a builder in your congregation, in fact I would say especially if you've got a builder in your congregation, you need to do an above board process where you go out to the market and find at least 3 reputable builders that you say, how much would you charge us to build this? Now they're very familiar with that process. Obviously it's what they do all day long. It costs builders a lot of money to do a tender. So they have to put a lot of resources into costing what you give them, because they come in without knowing really what it is. They have to get their head around the building, cost it all out, work out how they build it. Usually there's a process where you interview them and they will suggest modifications. They'll say, oh look, here's our price, but if we think if you do this change, we could save you $500,000. And you go, that's a great idea. Nice. It's worth understanding that it costs them a lot of money, because you don't want to go to tender too early. For 2 reasons. It costs them a lot of money and they'll get really annoyed with you. If you go to tender, you say yes, and but we're not ready yet, we'll be ready in 3 years' time. You don't want to do that. Secondly, tenders go off like milk in the sun. So usually they've got an actual explicit clause in them that says 90 days or whatever it is. And so once you get past that period, they'll say, well, look, and genuinely they have to recost it again. Because if they rely on something they did 12 months ago, the market's changed and now the building costs them a ton more money to build. So you've got to run some kind of process. That's a bit of a detailed process. You need to draw others from church into that process. You need to have people on your side of the table, people on their side. You work it through. You select a builder. And there's all kinds of wisdom in that process, but
and again, reach out to us. We're looking for the conversation.
There's lots to think into there, but that's a real process that needs to be done carefully at the right time. You really want to be in a position where you say, builder B, we want you. You want to be pretty much signing up a building contract pretty quickly after that, and going. So you need to have your money arranged and all that. You need to have already got your banking arranged. I would recommend you do a finance tender at the same time as you do a building tender. So go to the banks and say, here's our package. We would like you to tell us what you would do to lend us this much money for this building that we want to build, and you open up a conversation with them. But you get all your ducks lined up, sign the building contract. These can often be quite complex depending on the church structure you have. So if you're a Baptist, if you're an Anglican, you're a Presbyterian, you're going to have to deal with the denominational structure. And sometimes that contracting is quite complex. So in the Anglican Church in Sydney, for example, you've got all these 3-way contracts because the contract is actually with the property trust, not with the congregation. But the congregation has to sign all these documents with the property trust to give the property trust confidence to sign the building and the finance contracts. And you have all these 3-way deals going, and it's quite complex. So understand that, and understand that can take a bit of time, and that sometimes trips you up because the builder's ready to go, and then the diocese or the session or whatever it is take 3 months to get some document from the basement of some building somewhere to get it. So you just got to understand that can happen. Once the other thing to say is, actually reaching back into the previous episode, I did mention that you want to bring on a project manager.
Yes.
At some point in that design process, there's arguments about whether it's before DA, during DA, after DA, you bring on a project manager. Again, the diocese in Sydney, the Anglican Diocese of Sydney, forces you to do that for a large project.
Yep.
You have to pay a project manager. They come on board and they help you to manage the process.
Yep.
So you definitely need them on board. But then you move into the construction.
Yes.
So you've moved off site.
Yep.
Your building's there, or your vacant land's there, or whatever the thing is that you're building, and the building commences at that point once you've signed all the documents.
Nice.
And it's all going.
Nice.
In reality, what you've done in doing a tender and a building contract is you're saying, okay, builder, we're going to pay you $5 million to build this building,
yep.
and they build the building for you.
Yeah.
And that you don't build the building, they do.
Yeah.
And so there's a constant stream of questions.
Yeah, okay.
that they will have,
yes.
and I'm serious. It is seriously constant. In an active building process, you're going to have multiple questions every day.
Yep.
The project managers can field some of that, but actually you don't want them making the decisions,
yes.
because a lot of the decisions the builders make when they're building, because they'll cut into a wall and go, oh, the frames go that way instead of that way.
Yeah.
That wasn't on the plan.
Okay.
Or they'll, like as happened at Carlingford, they'll dig into the ground and go, there's a gigantic amount of building waste down here. We're going, what? This was a farm.
Yeah.
Turned out that the builder that built the original building imported something like 800 tonnes of contaminated waste and built the building on top of 800 tonnes of contaminated waste. When I say contaminated, it's not like radioactive, but it contains chips of asbestos.
Although, can I say, when I first came to Carlingford, I had hair, and I don't anymore, so I know contaminated.
Yeah. So, things can be thrown up. So you have a constant load of work to be done.
How do churches deal with that? Like, you've got constant questions coming each day. Like, what's the best way for them to navigate those situations?
Partly it depends on the scale of the build. It depends on what kind of project manager you've got. But I think largely you need what I describe as a sacrificial goat.
Yes.
Which has been me in many church situations. So our job is to field all the questions and to run interference between the building process and the church organism, and to work out what kind of question is this. This is a question that the architect needs to answer, the structural engineer needs to answer, the mission leader needs to answer, the senior minister needs to answer. Who needs to answer this question? Yeah. Or can I just answer it? Yep. You need somebody in that role that's in the hot seat that is effectively is the client.
Yes.
The project manager is the client's representative, but somebody needs to actually be the client.
Yeah.
So if you used a patriarchal analogy of a household, it's often dad.
Yeah.
You're building a house for the family, but dad will often field the questions. Sometimes it's mum.
Yeah.
But somebody in the family is the one that is in it.
Yeah.
And they're dealing with all the ins and outs. So don't underestimate that. It's a constant thing. Yep. Even though they're building it, they'll be constantly asking you questions. It's annoying too, because the reality is sometimes they'll ask you a question because they've got $28,000 worth of men arriving today to do a job with a crane, and if you can't answer the question, if it's serious enough, they'll back the job off and they'll charge you $28,000 because you weren't available to answer the question, or, which is sometimes worse, they'll just decide for themselves, and then you'll come and go, what did you do that for? And then you've got to decide, do you pay $50,000 to reverse the decision they just made?
Okay.
So there's a bit at stake in this building process, and so when I say sacrificial goat, it is very grating and difficult for that person. It's a tough job.
Yeah. Now, so there's all those particular things. I guess the other aspect is, as the building continues on and all those conversations happen, and we've got our sacrificial goat, and he's looking weary and wearier by the day, there's an end point to it where you get the excitement of coming back to the building. what do we need to start thinking about as we return to the building?
Well, bouncing off that too, there's also joy in the building.
Yeah.
So one of the things you want to do is I was going to say document, but really what you're talking about is filming it.
Yeah.
And showing church who's meeting in a shoebox over there somewhere that here's what's going on, you know, the frame went up today and here's the roof, and we got a drone and we did a bit of drone photography from above, and you could see what they were doing, and it was very exciting. So don't underestimate that. Now, not everybody gets excited by that stuff, but literally the majority do, I think. They just love seeing it.
Yeah.
And
I remember we did a few videos of in there, like, you know, here's
with
where
the helmets on.
auditorium's going to be. The slab's been laid, and this is really exciting. This is, you know.
So you want to bring church along for the ride to some extent, without the painful bits, but the nice bits.
Yeah. So
they get to kind of see it, and there's hope. Mm-hmm. But yes, you need to start thinking about moving back in.
Yeah.
And so you've got to think about logistics of moving back in, which is often, again, underestimated.
Yes.
How do you actually get the building up and running? Because you'll probably find you'll need to buy furniture. You'll need to, what kind of chairs are going to go in there? Yeah. That's got to be part of your project. So Carlingford is a good example. I think we had a budget of something like $250,000 on the side of the roughly $5 million building for the stuff we needed to occupy the building. So chairs, sound gear, audio-visual gear, what kind of projectors are we going to have in the new space, because the old ones won't work because it's a different space. So you got all that kind of stuff going on as well. So thinking into that stuff, but then the organism of church, how are we moving in? When are we moving in? Which congregations go when? And then you've got the mission piece. And I've got to say, the best profile your church is ever going to get in the local community is the building process. It's a giant billboard that says this church is alive and happening. Absolutely. And the community is genuinely interested. So my view is, be like the opposite of a carpet warehouse. You know, they're always having their closing down sale. Have 6 months of openings. Just open the building every weekend. Get the bishop in, get the archbishop in, get the mayor in, get the local member in. Have an open day. Have a kids day. Just have as many openings as you can, and have a day where you get the neighbours to come. Try and just absolutely milk it. Yeah, no, that's really helpful, because you've got lots of people. They see the hoardings, you know, the banners around that says here's the building company, and, you know, around where we were when we did Carlingford, we almost wanted to put this as not another block of units, because that's what every building was in that particular neck of the woods. You do want to, I mean, we didn't say this before, but you do want some element of communication with the local people. In the DA process, you need to do it. In the building process, so we put posters on, like, billboards outside that explained what we were doing. There was a rumour went around when we were building Carlingford among the local community that we were building a 24-hour daycare centre, which apart from anything else is illegal. But that was the rumour that was going around. So getting into that space a little bit and saying this is what we're doing is helpful.
Nice. Okay, so we've dealt with some things, you know, in that building process. We're back in. You know, what are some of the things we want to think about as we've returned to the building?
Probably the two main things, apart from your openings and your Thanksgiving to God for what's happened, and have a party.
It is important, I think, to celebrate with your team. Like, it is a team effort to pull this off. So the people who've been intricately involved, celebrate together and stop and rejoice, because often we're not good at that. We just go, all right, what's next? Let's stop and celebrate.
So you've got that element of celebrating. You've obviously, in terms of the building sense, you've got the defects period, 12-month defect period. In a large and complex building, you'll be managing that all the way up to the end of 12 months and beyond. So you generally document what's going on, and some of the things take longer than the 12 months to actually fix. Hopefully you don't have anything major, but in a large building you have lots of things that don't work, doors that don't quite work, things that don't quite work, and you're chasing the finishing touches for a while. The other thing is the sacrificial goat. So one of the realities is the goat will need to go and rest for a while.
Put him out to pasture for a little bit.
It is truly exhausting. And I've said this before. The reality is, when you do anything major like that, it takes so much out of you, and there's an emotional letdown that happens. There's almost a depression that comes. So look after that person.
Yeah.
There's a sense of you need to kind of give them a softer year, and it takes a while to recover.
Yeah.
And you know the old received wisdom that the senior minister always leaves within 12 months of the building project. And I don't think that always needs to happen.
No.
But I can see why it does. It's because there's so much emotion in it, and there's this come down from it. Yeah. The other thing I would say in terms of looking after the sacrificial goat, one of the problems you will get. So Carlingford, a church of almost 1,000 people, if there's, let's say, a crack in a concrete slab out the front or something that you've talked to the builders about and they're going to fix,
yes,
you will have 1,000 people tell you, did you know that there's a crack in the
concrete?
And the first 10 times you take it with good grace, and by the 100th person you want to kill somebody. And you don't want the goat to end up in prison.
That's right.
So yeah, there's just a reality about that stuff too. That it can be quite a hard period actually. Yeah. You didn't expect it, but it can be quite a hard period.
So let me final question here. This has been great. Building buildings, as hard as it is, as complex, there's an excitement that comes with it as well. But we have, over the last sort of couple of episodes, really done a deep dive. Lots of, is this possible? Can we do this? Is it feasible for us to do this?
It is. We to cycle back to the land thing.
Yeah.
Obviously, land prices in Australia have been skyrocketing for decades now, actually probably since the 1800s somewhere. But particularly recently, during the pandemic, and even especially regional markets have really lifted. So all of this is doable. So what I want to say is, don't underestimate it, but it is doable.
Yeah.
But the land piece now is a bigger problem than it was.
Yep.
Having said that, as I was saying, the Anglican Church's Growth Corporation was set up kind of recognising that we need to work together to make this happen. It's individual parishes are going to struggle to do this. And I think, by analogy, the other systems in varying ways are doing that too. In some ways, the Baptist Church has been ahead of the curve in some areas of this, but particularly on their financial side of it. So they've got their internal, what's it called, Baptist Financial Services. I think that was quite a helpful structure that they built. They kind of built their own development bank, which was a great idea. The FIEC churches have their independence, and that's in the name. But it implies some difficulty for them, because each individual congregation may well struggle. Yeah. So I think there's a place for thinking about how we work together on these things. How do we move on doing these things? One of the bits of received wisdom years ago was we should be buying churches from other denominations as they struggle. They've got a church for sale. Another, I didn't mention this before, but in the planning thing, there's another emerging trend, which is zoning out churches that are defunct. Yes. So a church that's abandoned, I know one of the council areas in Sydney they're either going to do it or they've already done it, where if the church is vacant
for 12 months,
they lose the right of occupation there. Yep. And that's really problematic. Yeah. So buying old dead churches may not be the strategy it once was, although that's not everywhere yet, but I feel like it's coming.
Yeah.
So there's a whole question about how do we get the land, and even these building steps that we're talking about, even if you own the land and you've got a building, taking those next steps, I think, and I one of the joy points in the last 10 years is, I think in the evangelical world we are working better together. Yeah. And we're cooperating more across organisational, denominational lines. Yeah. Yeah. And I think we need to do that more and try and work. But I think that the buzzword is we've got to work together.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing you say there is, yep, it's doable. Don't underestimate by any stretch, the complexities that's involved, and there's a joy and almost a necessity for us to be able to work together in order to put, either improve current church facilities, acquire new land, become that physical presence in the community that says we're not a flash in the pan, we're here to stay, to minister to this local community.
To come at it from another angle too, we must do this.
Yeah.
We must continue to build churches.
Yeah.
Because the building we're in was built in, I think, the early 60s. Elements of it are at the end of their life.
Yeah.
We're extending life on bits of it, but buildings don't last forever.
Yeah.
They really don't, especially modern buildings. They're not designed to last for 1,000 years like some of the old ones were.
Yeah.
And we must build new buildings.
Yeah.
We must put churches in areas where we don't already have churches. So we've got to figure out how to do this. So there's a gospel imperative in this, which is that, yes, it's hard, don't underestimate it, we've got to work together, but we must do it for the sake of the gospel.
That's really helpful.
Yeah.
That's really helpful. Look, thanks so much, Andrew, for joining us, and thanks for sharing your expertise here. You've been joining us for another Reach Australia podcast. We've been talking all things building. Thanks for joining us. We'd love to see you at the Reach Australia National Conference. You can check out some of the buildings that Andrew's been involved with. And if you've got further questions, we'd love a conversation. We'd love to help your church move forward as we seek to have thousands of multiplying evangelistic churches across Australia.